can't lose a Boeing.
I got number
You
30.
can't lose some of these companies.
Hello,
Companies,
everyone.
frankly, Bill,
Sorry
that
if it's a
were
little loud back
solid
here,
as, like,
but
AAA companies.
we are
Because of what's
watching
happened over
Trump.
the
So I'm
last
just reacting to
couple
the
of
Trump's
weeks, they go from
news
AAA to being
conference.
like they could use a hand.
Tough times.
Let's
We
see what's
can't,
going
you're
on.
right. We
Tough
can't lose those
times.
companies.
Trying to see his logic.
Millions of jobs. The faster we go back, the better it's going to be. We have a pent-up energy that's going to be unbelievable. We're going to bring it back fast. I really believe that.
I've got a lot more questions, and so does my colleague Harris Faulkner. I'll allow her to rejoin the conversation now. Harris.
Do I have an earplug here?
I'll help you out.
If I could do that.
Go ahead, Harris.
All right. What's up, Angry Roach? What's going on?
Hello, Mr. President. So good to see you today. This will be a little bit to relay. I understand you guys are going back and forth on the economy and employers, but more than 66% of people are employed by small businesses. The VP talked a little bit about this. We hear you dropping big companies' names. The question here is, how do you shore up both as you look forward?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Small businesses are the majority of the.
One. At this point, you're talking about Boeing, and yet you've got what 2/3 of American businesses are small businesses. When you think about what they're trying to do in terms of adjusting to this new reality that's been thrown on them, what will you do for small business?
Okay, well, first of all, I have to say that Harris is one of my favorite people. And I didn't hear a word she said, and I was hoping it wasn't too devastating a question. But she is a fantastic person, I have to say.
He's going to answer the question. He doesn't even know what it is.
I can't hear Harris. But no, the bill is very much focused on the small business person. It's very much focused on small companies, including restaurants and all sorts of small companies.
How?
And what people don't realize, you're talking about these massive, we have the greatest companies in the world. You add them all up, and the small businesses are just about equal in size to these massive companies, of which we have many also. It's the engine of our country, small business. This bill is absolutely aimed at the small business and the worker and the workers of those small businesses and the owners. The owners are going to need help. They're going to need some loans. They're going to need things, and we're going to be able to take care of them, because we don't want those small businesses to go out of business, nor do we want the big businesses to go out of business.
When they said, Mr. President, we got to shut this down, how hard did you push back?
Well, I'll tell you, I never heard of such a thing. We've had flus where we lose 36,000. We've lost as many, I guess, as 78,000 people in 1 year. And they came in and they said to me, sir, we're going to have to close the country. I said, what are you talking about?
Hello, everybody. Hey.
Well, we have a virus. It's coming in.
Just
and I
watching
knew that,
Trump's
and I made the early decision
town
with
hall,
China.
answering our questions.
Already closed it off to China, and that was a long time before they came in. But they came in, experts, and they said, we're going to have to close the country. I said, we've never closed the country before. This never happened before. You're saying, I said, are you serious about this? We are going to take this country that's fully employed, where we have 160 million people working.
One by the TV.
And you're telling me we have to close it? And people are going to go out of business, and they're going to go bankrupt, and they're not going to have jobs? What are we talking about here?
Watching Trump.
Don't forget, this has never been done. We've had flus before. We've had viruses before. So this is something new. And this is why I say we have to, I gave it 2 weeks, and I guess by Monday or Tuesday, it's about 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And we'll assess at that time, and we'll give it some more time if we need a little more time. But we have to open this country.
When they came to you and had that conversation with you, how long did it take you to accept that new reality?
Well, I accept things. I understand things very quickly. I mean, I understood exactly
You
what
get
they
phones
were saying.
ringing over here.
But we can socially distance ourselves and go to work, and you'll have to work a little bit harder. You can clean your hands 5 times more than you used to. You don't have to shake hands anymore with people. That might be something good coming out of this. Although I must tell you, as a politician, it's a lot warmer when you walk into a crowd and you're shaking a lot of people's hands. You love those people.
I'd agree with you.
They love me and I love them.
Yeah, I don't think he gets
it. A little bit colder, but
yeah, it's a little
but
colder.
you won't be
It's
shaking
not
hands
as
for at least a
personable.
while, and things will happen. But we have to put the country to work. Look,
he's not giving us any
a number
real
of people to the flu,
reasons, though.
But you're going to lose more people by putting a country into a massive recession or depression.
But how does he know that
You're gonna
though?
lose
Like,
people.
I would
You're
agree.
gonna have
I would agree. But like,
suicides
where's he getting
by
this?
the thousands.
How do you know
All
that?
sorts of things.
How do you know you're going to have
gonna
suicides by the
instability.
thousands?
You can't just come in and say, "Let's close up the United States of America." The biggest,
Anybody can throw out a number
the
like
most
that. Like
successful
what? Like
country in the
what
world
grants
by
that
far.
number? Thousands of suicides. Like where
When
do you
I
get
came
that
in, when I
number
was
from?
elected,
Is
they
it
knew
is there
this
some
number.
study
China
he's?
was going to overtake us in the year 2019.
That's a hell of a number to
It
throw out.
wasn't even close. We went way up, and they didn't. We've done great. They pay us a fortune in tariffs and everything else.
I don't
and
get
yet
it.
We have a good relationship.
Where did you get
with
these
them.
numbers from?
We just
Thousands
signed
of
a trade deal.
suicides if the economy
We're the
top.
number one
Maybe
in
there
the
will
world
be
by far.
suicides. I
And
agree,
now
but
a few people walk into the
I
Oval
don't know.
Office. They say, "Sir,
maybe
we
I'm
have to close up the country."
And
maybe
that
I'm
was-
missing
I
it.
said, "What are you talking
And that,
about?"
Mr. President, must have been a very difficult thing to accept.
One of the
Yes.
most difficult
I agree.
decisions I've ever
It's had to
made.
be. Had to be.
Because I knew that when you do it, as soon as you do it, you're going to drop. I mean, they're talking about 20 or 25 points of GDP. Nobody's ever heard of 25 points. If we went down a point, that's a big deal. Now, all of a sudden, you're basically turning off the country. I said, this has never been done before.
Yeah, but
What are you
it's
talking about?
economy versus laws, though. It's
But
economy versus
we
laws.
understand it. You have hot
Mr.
spots, but
President,
we've had hot spots before. We've had horrible flus. I mean, think of it.
it's not
We
like the flu,
averaged
though.
36,000 people. Death. I'm not talking about cases. I'm talking about death. 36,000 deaths a year. People die, 36 from the flu.
Mm-hmm.
But we've never closed down the country for the flu.
Yeah,
So you
because
say to yourself,
we can
what is
handle the
this all
flu.
about?
The flu is the healthcare
Now-
system can handle the flu.
How did you?
It's never been done.
It
how
can't
did you
handle
process
7
that?
flus.
Not good. I wasn't happy about it. And I also knew that
See, he doesn't
I
get the
had
run
to
on the
do it
healthcare system. It doesn't
because-
seem like he gets the infection rate
uh,
piece. Like,
with
yeah, he's
Turkey,
right.
I
We
give
can
this
take
as an
a certain,
example,
but if
in
you have a run on the bank,
I
a
said,
run on the healthcare
sign
system,
a deal
it's just
with the
it's
Kurds. Make
too many
peace.
people going to the
Erdogan,
hospital at the same
he
time.
didn't
That's
want-
what's going to
he's a-
kill people.
He's a man who loves Turkey. And I have a very good relation. I said, sign a deal. He didn't really want to. The Kurds didn't really want
You
to.
hear the sirens in the
And it went
background
on,
there
you know,
too.
the so-called safe zone, recently, a few months ago. I said, sign a deal. Do me a favor, sign a deal. Get it done. They didn't really want to. All of a sudden, they start fighting. And it was vicious, and other countries got involved. Now I
What's
said,
he
let's
talking
sign a
about
deal.
now?
They said, okay, we'll sign a deal.
What are you talking
We
about?
needed a period because I don't think if I would have not done it, we would have been
It's supposed to be a
unbelievably
coronavirus
criticized for not
town
doing
hall.
it.
What's
But
he
it's
talking
never
about?
been done before.
Okay,
So-
yeah,
but
what?
somehow the word got out that this is the thing we're supposed to be doing. Now, we've had some really bad epidemics and
Okay.
other things. I mean, we're going this pandemic, but we've had bad epidemics. I'm sure they could have been called pandemics.
All right.
But we never did a thing like this before, but I had to do it. It's been very painful for our country and very destabilizing for our
Saying the
country.
same thing over and
We have
over
to go
again.
back to work much sooner than people thought. And people can go
Okay.
back to work and they can also practice good judgment.
One last
Yes,
question.
all
and
right.
we get back to our viewers here too. A month ago, the CDC had an initial test that failed. At that moment, late February, you said it's perfect, and it wasn't perfect. So what happened there in the early stages in late February?
I said it was
Fox
perfect
News
was my
with the good
conversation
question.
with the head of the Ukraine. That's what I really said
Bring
was
it back.
perfect. Okay, that was another whole scandal nonsense, a total, witch hunt. But this one is
Uh-oh.
a much different thing. We had other administrations, not just the last one, they built up a
Okay.
platform. They built up a test. But the test was no good. It didn't handle large numbers of people. It was okay for a very
What
small
is he
group,
talking
but not for
about?
a large group. So we had to
then
break it
What
down.
test?
Did the
What's he talking
CDC
about?
screw up,
What is he
or
talking
did you
about?
screw
No,
up,
we
or-
did not screw
Where
up.
did this
And
go
I don't think
wrong?
CDC screwed
They're
up.
asking,
either.
where did he go
They had
wrong?
a test that would have worked for a small group of people. In other words, for a normal problem. I
Huh?
don't think anybody could have, in all fairness to CDC, and this is a big government agency.
Does anybody in the
There's
chat
very
know what
good
they're
people
talking
in
about
there.
when they talk about
But
this
nobody ever
test?
expected a thing like this. Nobody would say that millions and millions of people would have been tested. So what we did is we
all right.
broke that egg. We broke that system.
They had a bad.
And
All right,
we've
so supposedly they had a
created a
bad
new
test at the
system
beginning.
that
Then
now we're doing unbelievably big numbers. and it's set for the future should we ever
Okay.
need it again. I hope we don't need it again.
Thank you for your
Yeah.
time. We're going to bring the others in as well in a moment. Thank you for being patient. We will get to you.
Oof.
We have so many questions, not only from our network, but from
He's not
millions
answering
of
any
people all across
questions.
the country.
He's not answering
So
any
your
questions.
in a moment here as we continue live in the Rose
They're
Garden
gonna
at the
make
White
us.
House
They're gonna make
with
us
the
eat
president and his task force.
a commercial right now. We got to eat a commercial. Yo, look who I got coming in. Uncivil law. What's going
So-
on?
My name becomes more and more appropriate with every passing day.
That's right. Uncivil. What's going on, brother? How you doing? You surviving the apocalypse? Are you?
I am
surviving?
doing. I am surviving the apocalypse. Our mayor is supposed to be announcing shelter in place today. I don't know
Oh,
if that's actually happened or not. I think it was supposed to be happening at 2:00 my time, so that's 2 hours from now.
yo,
So-
it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. Like I am truly shocked at where we're at today. I'm like if you'd have asked me
Which part?
a year ago. No, I'm talking about just like the fact that we are here sheltering in place. Like if you'd have asked me this a year ago, I would have said you're crazy, insane. It would probably never happen. Like I would have been calling you a crackpot, but here we are. Here we are.
Yeah.
It's
The whole
what do you-
the whole situation is weird, and it goes to show a couple of things, like just the general fragility of life.
yes,
And like
yes.
there's always the idea that every one of us is only like 2 steps away or 3 steps away from disaster, right? And you know, if you get enough Yahtzees in the wrong direction at the same time, the same thing holds true for countries and the world. You know, it's like you know, you have all these things, they're just probability chances, and it's like, well, now you're on the wrong end of that swing.
What's
So
up?
yeah.
My daughter's asking me for chocolate while we still have supply. While we still have supply.
Yes, while there is still chocolate.
Oh man. Hold
It's
on.
like I hate to break this to you, young daughter, but chocolate is made from cocoa beans, which are not made in the United States, so that could be a problem.
Hey, but before this Fox News thing comes back up, what's going on with the defense what is it? The Defense Authorization Act. I keep saying, for some reason I keep saying reauthorization, but actually it's the Defense Production Act, right?
Yeah,
The
Defense
Defense
Production
Production Act. So what it does, for those of you who don't
Everyone
know,
here on coronavirusnow.com and on Fox 10 Extra, as we are awaiting. Once again, we will be
that's
hearing
the news
from
awaiting.
President live at the White House.
So
in
what do you
just
think
a
about
few
them
moments. We're
allowing?
bringing that to you as
Let me,
he's doing a virtual
mute
town
this real
hall
quick.
with
All right, that should have muted it for you guys.
I think in times of genuine emergency that you know we bend the rules to deal with the emergency is basically the short analysis. If you want like the legal precedent for quarantine orders and vaccine orders, I covered this on my channel week before last Friday, where I covered 3 U.S. Supreme Court cases from the early 20th century dealing with mandatory vaccines, mandatory vaccinations. Long story short, yes, it's constitutional if the need is, you know, present.
It's got the
And-
Karamatsu and
Yeah.
Korematsu, and even when it comes to, let's say, equal protections, it's evaluated under strict scrutiny, and national security is one of those things where you could, you know, theoretically even discriminate on the basis of race if there's a good enough reason. So it's, you know.
Yeah, it's like this was something I've seen pop up in my own law channel and other people's law channels. Like, don't these prohibitions against assembling or being in large groups infringe on the First Amendment? Doesn't it prohibit, you know, First Amendment freedom of religion? I'm like, well, normally we go to strict scrutiny analysis. Is it a
Exactly.
compelling governmental interest in least restrictive means? Now, normally passing that test is really, really, really hard. But right now, a judge is going to say, I don't know, man. Compelling, least restrictive could be.
well, but based on the projections. Hold on, let me get back to Trump. He's back on.
Injected herself in and all of
And you-
we
and
didn't
we're
have
just responding
we
to
didn't have
whatever we
anything
had,
that was even
reacting to it.
remotely signable.
Turn this up.
But now I hear just from a few minutes ago that they're
Can you
doing
hear it well?
and it's for the
can.
workers, it's for the people of the country, and I hear they're doing pretty well. So we'll see how it comes out. But it should have been well. It's like I watched Governor Cuomo and he was very nice. We're
Okay.
building them hospitals, we're building them medical centers, and he was complaining about we're doing probably more, definitely more than anybody else. And
Of course,
he
you're the
was
federal
talking about
government.
the ventilators, but he should have ordered the ventilators. And he had a choice. He had a chance because right here,
Throwing
I just
shade
got
at
this
Cuomo?
out, that he refused to order 15,000 ventilators. I'll show
He
this to
refused to
Bill.
order
Take
15,000
a look at that, Bill.
ventilators.
What does that say?
Is
You
this
can-
Go ahead
social
and read it to
distancing
us.
here?
This says New York Governor Cuomo rejected buying recommended 16,000 ventilators in 2015 for a pandemic. Established death panels and lotteries instead. So he had a chance to buy in 2015 16,000 ventilators at a very low price, and he turned it down. I'm not blaming him or anything else, but he shouldn't
What
be talking
the
about
hell
us.
is he
He's
talking
supposed to
about?
be buying his own ventilators. We're going to help. But you know, if you think about Governor Cuomo, we're building
In
him 4 hospitals.
2015?
We're building him 4 medical centers. We're working
What is he talking
very,
about?
very hard for the
I'm
people
not
of New
100%
York.
sure.
We're working along with him, and then I watch him on the show complaining, and he had 16,000 ventilators that he could have had at a great price, and he didn't buy them.
You're talking about what,
Yeah, and
6
I hear
years
you going
ago?
back and forth, and Governor Cuomo has talked
5
in
years
recent
ago?
days that you regularly talk and have a good relationship.
You could have bought 15,000
And
ventilators
so we will
5
follow
years
the
ago.
news
What?
as you're bringing it to us there, right there in the Rose
5
Garden.
years
I
ago,
want
why
to get
would
to a
you?
viewer because the people's voice is so huge right now. And
That's
always,
crazy.
Mr.
What the hell?
President,
What the
Joyce
hell is he
submitted
talking
a
about?
question from Facebook about the stimulus check.
That's
Let's watch,
embarrassing.
and I want to get your reaction.
I am fortunate I can continue to work. I can telecommute. There are people who are losing jobs. They're losing
economy is
an
totally
entire
hosed.
income for
Yeah, of course.
households.
We're completely totally
And
hosed.
rather than receive a check, I would just like to pay it forward and have the government pass mine on to someone else.
Wow, is that great?
Wow.
Well,
Mr.
you
President.
obviously come from West Virginia. I love that state. And thank you very much,
West
Joyce. I'll tell you what,
Virginia.
that's great. I wish we had more people like Joyce, I'll tell you. But, you know, it's going to be a substantial amount of money, around $3,000 for a family of 4. And assuming it all gets done, assuming we can get the Democrats to sign it. But it'll be great. But, Joyce, I think that's such a nice gesture. Really, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, and you just said, right when you and I began talking a few minutes ago, that, you know, almost in breaking news fashion, it looks like the juggernaut might be moving on Capitol Hill to try to push toward that stimulus bill. So we'll be watching for that. You know, Mr. President,
Yeah,
I'm
way to
watching
go,
the Dow
Democrats,
as
on
you
rejecting the
have been
first one. That
talking
looks real
and
good,
formerly
right?
the vice president. It's
Oh,
up
that
by
was
more
hard.
than
Their
1,500
Democrats'
points.
messaging is horrible.
What do you watch for each
It's like when
day?
the
I mean, are you
progressive
keeping
win
your
and the
eye on
Democrat
that?
Party is the
is it
Republicans
companies
are more
calling
progressive than the
small and
Democrats
large?
are.
Like,
You know,
what is
something's
your
going wrong.
barometer that, okay,
Yeah.
things are in trouble or things are doing better?
Okay.
Well, I think the Dow was
This is a good
helped by the
question.
fact
This is a good
that
question.
they, you know, there were theories that we were going to stay out for 4 or 5 months, and you can't do that. You destroy our country if you did a thing like that. And we're going to be opening relatively soon. And our time comes up on Monday or Tuesday, the allotted 2 weeks, but we'll stay a little bit longer than that. But we want to get open very soon. I think that was a big reason it's gone up. I also think that the fact that the Senate and the House, we seem to be getting along as much as you can get along. We seem to be getting along now on a bill. I think that maybe
Hopefully
had
they can
even
get something.
less of an
But
impact than the fact that
the
we're opening up
the
this.
Democrats
incredible
lost the
country.
whole bill
We have
argument.
to do that.
I don't even know why
I'd
they're
love to
blocking
have
the
it
bill.
open by Easter.
They should have.
I
They
would
should have
love to
gotten
have it
their
open
bill
by
out
Easter.
first
I will-
and
I
forced
will
the
tell you that
Republicans
right
to
now.
their.
I would
If
love
the House
to have
Representatives
that.
ran and got a
It's
bill
such
out,
an important day for
then
other reasons.
it would have been. But if you give
I'll
the
make it an
Republicans
important
the
day for
bill,
this too. I would love
it's
to have
ridiculous
the
because it
country
allows them to
open
The
up
RNC commercials
and
write
they're
themselves.
Just raring
Yeah.
to go.
Just
by
put up
Easter.
random force speech of random
That's
Democrat
April
disposing it
12th.
and
So
interlace
we
with
can watch
photos
and
of
see what
people on
happens. I'm
ventilators
gonna
and be
toss
like, the
it back to
Democrats want
my
to kill you,
cohort,
pay
Bill.
by for the
Thank you,
RNC.
Harris.
know,
That
it's
would
like,
be a great
easy.
American resurrection 2.5+ weeks from now.
the Democrats should have gotten their
Dr.
bid out
Brooks,
earlier,
a
and
series
then
of questions
they
on the medical
don't
front
want to
here.
do
I wanna
this.
go to
They don't want to give
Allison
you the
from
money. They don't want to do this.
Indiana, appropriately so.
So
Mr. Vice
bad
President,
politics.
who has a question by way of Facebook about possible mutation. Watch.
See, this is the
My
problem.
question is this. If you were to get the coronavirus, can it mutate and can you get it again?
Dr. Burks?
So
Just
that's
hit
a
them
great
all hard.
question.
Two
And a
answers,
very
yes and
smart
no one
question.
knows.
Because it's
Yes.
an RNA virus, it can mutate and it constantly mutates. But what has been pretty good about the coronaviruses in general is they keep their structural pieces very similar. What do I mean by that? There's the outer coat, the envelope, and the inside part of the virus has stayed very constant. It's even very similar to SARS, which we haven't seen since 2003. And so what has been picked for sites, both for the vaccine and for monoclonal antibodies, are very much those constant sites. And we believe that anybody who becomes positive and makes effective antibody, because there are some people who can't make as good of antibody as others. But if you make effective antibody, you shouldn't get reinfected.
The way it was described to me, and correct the medical positioning of this question,
That was a
but
good
the
answer for that
virus is
question.
trying to figure out a way to survive. And that's where it moves around and it mutates. Now, in Singapore, there was a headline earlier today suggesting a possible second wave in that
Ooh.
island nation. How do you
Second
you
wave. We
gauge
haven't even
that?
thought about the first
Well,
wave.
remember in Singapore, they took the president's guidelines and they executed them very early because they could see China next door. And so they saw those and they implemented those guidelines. So very few people became infected in Singapore. Because so few people have been infected, you don't have what they call herd immunity. And so until we get through this current pandemic, if it has seasonality, which we hope and believe it could, if it gets through this current
Like the seasonal
season,
flu.
it will be in everybody's best interest to do as the president has recommended, our work on vaccines, our work on additional therapeutics, and really getting to both pre and post prophylaxis so that the healthcare providers can get a shot potentially that will protect them. We would call it pre-exposure prophylaxis. All of those things are being worked on to prepare us for the next season. We're focused today on what we need today and to get through this current epidemic. And then we're also getting prepared in case it comes back in the fall or in case it comes back in the fall of 2021 when we'd have a vaccine.
I'm going to bring in the Surgeon General on this, and to both of you, I've been listening to you very
hope they have
carefully
a
for weeks
vaccine.
now. And what you've said is we want to be the model of South Korea. Well, South Korea has flattened the curve, to borrow a phrase, and their death rate is about 1.2%. This morning here in the U.S., our death rate was right around that same mark, 1.3%. To the Surgeon General, what does that tell you? Or how much do you consider the death rate here at home when we try and make decisions for ourselves?
Well, thank you for that, Bill. I think there are a couple of important things for the American people to remember. The first one is that when you look at the data here in the United States, of all the people who we've tested so far, only about 90% of those, 90% of those folks do not have the coronavirus. They test negative.
Good.
So most people, even when they have cold and flu symptoms, do not have coronavirus, number one. Number two,
That's actually
98,
pretty good.
99% of people are recovering. So people need to understand that, yes, some people will get coronavirus in many communities across America, but that most of them will recover.
Yeah,
That's
the
very
virus
important
isn't
for
killing people.
To,
The virus
to understand.
is not the
And,
thing that's killing
beyond
people.
that,
It's
we're trying to help
the
people
run on the
understand
hospitals. That's the thing
importance
that's
of
killing people.
stopping the spread. And the president, when he 9 days ago listened to his health providers, his health consultants, he said, what do we need to do right now? And we said, we need to lean into this next 2 weeks to stop the spread. And then we need to reassess. And one thing I can tell you for certain is that I've been on the task force for 3 weeks. And the president listens to Tony Fauci. He listens to Dr. Birx. He listens when I, or Dr. Carson, or Dr. Hahn, or Dr. Redfield speak up.
So
And he
what are
also
they
listens
saying?
to the governors. And so we will assess
Are
at
they
the
saying
end
in
of the
the,
14 days, and we'll figure out the most appropriate thing to do. And based on my experience in the task force so far, the president will make an appropriate decision based on all the data.
Thank you for that answer. Is everything cool with you and Dr. Fauci? He was not there.
Reasonable
He
position.
wasn't there last night for the briefing. He's not here today.
Is he
He
cool?
has other things to do. No, we get along very well.
Your relationship's
I don't
think
like
it's
this
been very
question
good.
at
You would
all.
have heard
I don't like
about
this
it
question
if
at
it
all.
was-
It's like
I mean,
trying to
it's-
sow
every time he
division.
does, he's not at a meeting, and sometimes
Like, you
other
know-
people.
Yeah,
don't.
like why aren't you
Trying
having
to-
him in here
Why
twice?
to create a
isn't,
division between Fauci
Dr.
and the
Birx at a
president?
meeting?
Why are we
Is there
trying
a
to do
problem?
this?
And I
Well,
said,
they are
Deborah,
asking
could you
about
please
this. Why
come
isn't
to
he
the
there?
meeting? Do you
Because he hasn't
mind?
been there
Because
twice. Like he was there every day, and all of a sudden
I
he misses
respect
two
all of these
two
I
straight.
assume he is
I think it's a fair
fine.
question.
and Deborah is
Yeah,
extraordinary.
I do understand what you
And
mean, because
Tony's
it's
extraordinary. I get
probably
along
nothing,
with
you
all
know.
of them.
But he's
But
missed
if
two.
there's-
You know, he's
you know,
here
they
every
have other
day, and now
things to
missed
do.
two
And
consecutive. You're
yesterday
like,
we
yo,
weren't
where's this
really
guy? Why is
talking
he?
about
You know, is he
what
doing something
he's
else? You know.
an expert on. We were talking about
Really
other
with
things,
yes.
a lot of other things. And,
I would have asked
I
the
don't think
question.
they
I
should
would have
be at
asked.
every
I would have.
So you're good. That's the point.
Miss Fauci. It
Yeah,
was
we're
Fauci.
fine. We're
Fauci.
fine.
Dr. Birx,
I like
early on
Fauci.
you said the massive amount of testing in South Korea, 96% to the Surgeon General's point, 96% came back negative. I think that's an
And
important point,
12.3 hospital
to
beds
convey
per
again
thousand
to the American
citizens.
people.
The USA
Noah
is
from
only
Maryland has a
2.9.
question now. His question
So
is
South
about,
Korea has a
healthcare
lot
workers on
more
the front lines of this.
beds per thousand people in the United States.
Now, my
They're,
mother
you
is a
know.
nurse. She works in the healthcare field. What do you and your team plan to do to help healthcare workers that are putting themselves at risk every single day as a result of the coronavirus?
Excellent question. Dr. Birx, you
That's
want
a softball
Yeah,
question.
I love that question because my mother's a nurse. She's 91
Trump
now,
say
so she's
earlier
not
that he gave,
practicing.
like,
but I think we have to
some number of
remember,
pallets of
in
PPE
majority
to
of
New York or
hospitals and in
something?
the majority of
I don't
places,
know.
it is the
He
nurse
said
that are the
he
front
said
lines.
Cuomo
They're the
didn't
ones
buy
working every
respirators
moment
5
with the
years ago and
patients to
should be
ensure
ashamed
that
of
they do
himself.
well. They're the
So
ones at the bedside. They're the ones
I don't know
providing
what Trump
comfort.
is
They're the
saying.
ones
Maybe they
providing
did.
the
I know
medical
they gave 400
interventions, and they are
respirators.
our first priority. It is why we've worked so hard to get the protective, personal protective equipment out there. But I think what we didn't often talk about is we're really, with the changing guidelines for testing, that is going to free
Damn it, he
up
wrote that
all
down,
of that
too. He pulled
personal
that on the- out of a
protective
piece of paper.
devices that were being utilized for testing back into the hospitals and the clinics for our nurses and doctors. And that's going to make millions of more masks and PPE, as we call it, available to the hospital workers who need it the most, because now people can self-test.
And Bill,
that'd
can
be
I jump
great.
in on that really quickly? I want people to know that I'm a still practicing anesthesiologist at Walter Reed. The vice president and I, we
Did these
first
numbers on
met
screen
during
change while
Ebola.
we've been watching them?
And
Yes.
I
Go up while
went
I'm
into the
watching them?
hospital.
Okay.
They
I
are
put
going
on
up.
PPE. I
Just
know
double
how
checking.
scary it is even when you have the proper equipment to deal with an infectious disease. And I'm getting texts, phone calls, messages from people all across the country. And I want healthcare workers of America to know we are fighting
wasn't it
for you each
593,
and
so
every
apparently
day
7
to
more
make sure
people
you
died
get
while we've been talking?
what you need from the stockpile,
Wow.
to make sure you get what you need from manufacturers across America.
crazy.
To make sure you're getting decreased demand, which is why we put out our new guidelines on elective surgeries. Because it's not just about increasing the supply. We aren't going to supply our way out of this problem, as important as supply is. We
You
need
got to
also
slow the
lower
infection
demand
rates.
by decreasing unnecessary usage of PPE. And a game
And the only
changer
way you're
that
gonna do
just
that
came
is
out
lower
this week
infection
was the new
rates.
FDA self
Right.
swabs. And the vice president and the president have talked about that will utilize less PPE. So we're working on making sure supply gets where it needs to, and FEMA's doing a great job of that, but lowering demand.
How can someone watching this right now acquire a self-test?
Well, right now, the FDA is making that more available. We've seen testing increase in real numbers. When you look at
He's
last
not
week
going-
from
not even
Monday
gonna
to
try to
Friday,
answer that
the
question.
amount of testing increased tenfold.
He's just not
So
throwing
we're
out
seeing
random
testing
facts.
increase. The concern is that it's actually using
Remember
up
the
more
question,
PPE, which
how
is
can
why we
regular
want to
people
prioritize
get
testing
this
for the people
particular
who are
test?
most in need, the
Yeah,
healthcare
well,
workers,
right
the
now,
people who are vulnerable.
you know, which
and
was
why
not
we're
what he- it
pushing.
was not what he was
the
saying
FDA has
about 5
lowered
seconds ago
barriers
for
like
great
none other
infection.
Nope.
to make
It's
sure
like
we can
we're
get
working
these
on
new
rolling
testing
this out, and
modalities
the question
available.
is, how can
to
we do
use
it
less
right now? The
PPE and
answer
do
to
more
which is
tests.
they
Thank you
can't.
for that. Back to
He
Harris
just
now with another
he asked the question. He said,
Harris.
"Just make a speech."
All right.
He just
Actually,
made
you
a
know what? I
speech.
want to
He
stay
didn't
on
even think
this
about the question.
home testing kit.
See, the home
topic for
testing
just a
kit.
second
When
with
can a regular
Dr.
person get it?
Birx. You know,
We've
the
tested
home
thousands
test,
of people.
Is there a place where people check a box and say I'm positive or not? How are you going to keep up with people who test themselves? And you need that information, Dr. Birx, to know where the clusters are in the country. That's part of why you would do it.
Great. So it's not a home test, it's a self-test.
The
So what do I
clusters are
mean by
everywhere,
that? I
if you know
mean,
what I
Yeah.
mean.
the individual can drive up,
Look at
receive
Louisiana.
the
Look at
items, because
Louisiana.
again, we still want to just test people with fever
Louisiana
and
went
symptoms
crazy.
that really need to be tested. They can self-swab the front of their nose, put it in the container, then the person can collect it with gloves alone with the biohazard bag and get it in. I just want to speak to the Americans for just a second, though. We have to ensure that we still are testing, even though probably by today we will have done more tests than South Korea did in 8 weeks, in the last 8
Yes.
days. In the last 8 days, we've done more testing than South Korea. But we did that because we transformed the testing process, as the president spoke to. But we don't want people who are just worried to go get tested. If you don't have a persistent fever, if you don't have a cough, if you're not in the risk group, if you're not a nurse or doctor, we really want the testing and the drive-through testing and the testing that is provided in the cities to be very much still focused on the people who need it, because there's only so much even those high throughput machines are doing. They're doing about 50, 60, 70,000 tests a day now.
Woo!
They could get potentially to
They ramped up on the tests.
150,000 a day.
That's good.
But
that's
we
good
want to
news.
make sure we're testing in the areas that really have the problems.
Yeah, Bill, it's
All
one
right,
of the things,
and
just
knowing
to
the
amplify
difference
that point,
between
if
the
I may.
home and, go right ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Harris. You know, the American people are asking all the time. The president and I hear it all the time.
He
and
got to
see
jump
it. It's
in. He's like,
what
damn, I
can
haven't
they
talked
do
in like
to
an
make a
hour.
difference?
Let me just
And
say
in
something
addition
here.
to the 15 days to slow the spread, the American people can take Dr. Birx's advice. It's that old proverb that it's not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. And one of the ways that you can help is by recognizing we want to focus testing on people that have symptoms. Although according to the tests now, as the Surgeon General said, 90% of the people that have been tested for the coronavirus don't have it. Okay, that number, we've tested more than 320,000 people.
But that may be
that's
good
an
and
encouraging
bad.
number, I would expect. But
Yeah,
for
I don't
any
know if that's good
American
or bad.
out
I don't
there
know what
that
that
just
tells
may
me.
be concerned,
Because that
but
that
not
could just
be
mean it's
symptomatic,
90% of the people
one
the
of
virus
ways
has
you
to
can
go
make
through.
sure
You know what I'm
the
saying?
testing's
That doesn't mean
available
that
for people
they
that
have
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 symptoms.
immunity.
And just as importantly,
Those
for
are
our
people the
healthcare
virus has to get through,
workers
are
that we
going
want
to
to make sure
infect.
have all the protective equipment that they need. You can recognize that if you don't have
And
symptoms,
that means that we're early in the numbers
do a
too.
test.
You know, if all these people are getting sick and we only
Harris, one thing I-
5% of the
and
people
Bill,
are,
Harris, one
10%.
thing I
Oh, this is
might
only
add,
10% of the
that to me is
population
so
that's
important.
infected.
Again,
That's a bad
we
sign.
took something that was broken and we made it the model. And I didn't even know, I just heard the number for the first time from Deborah, that in a short period of time, we've done more testing than South Korea. Now, you're not going to read that in the newspapers because they don't like to write things like that. But
No, that's good news.
I'd love you to say that one more time because that's a big number. We've
And
done
he just
more than
he
South
just
Korea
found
in a
that out.
short
He said he
period of
just
time.
found that
We're
out.
doing more now
If
than
he just
South
found
Korea
that
by
out,
a lot. What was that number?
How's she gonna?
So we're
She didn't tell him
believing
this
that
before
they're
this?
probably around 2,900. 29.
I don't know. I mean, he gets a lot of information, so who knows?
290,000
Like right now?
And now we're way over 300,000, but we achieved that
The first
over
time I've
last
ever heard
7
this
to
is
8
right
days.
now. Like what?
We have
She
to
didn't
do
tell you
more.
that
We
before you came out
understand
here.
that
Like
over
yo, we
months.
do.
Over about
We're
8
going up-
weeks.
We're going up proportionally. We're going up very, very rapidly. Every day we're going
What
up.
was our negative test rate at the moment? Is
I'm
it
glad you
90%
asked.
or is it higher?
So I really am glad you asked because this gets into where is the virus now and where is it expanding?
What's the negative test
And
rate? That was
so
the question.
Across the country, our test rates are still way under 10%, except for one place, New York City, Metro New York, New Jersey, close to New York City. Those rates are coming in the 28% range. Right now, New York, the case attack rate, what we're talking about, the number of people who are
Third
getting
man.
infected,
New York's-
is 4 to 5 times any other place in the country.
Why is that?
Ooh,
Density?
you were 4 to
I
5
think part of it
times
is density, part of
to
it is
get
the
infected
spread
here
that
in
may
New
have
York City.
happened
Don't go
on
outside.
metal surfaces, like in the subway,
That's crazy.
and people that were in the subway.
You see the
Part of
subways.
it may be a large number of people
Yeah.
came
Subways
back
are now
after
like a
Christmas
vein. You
from
get-
Asia
yeah.
that didn't get caught up in the closure.
Do you blame the governor for that?
And part of it could be the Europeans who have come back subsequently.
Why does he say
And
do
there's,
you
I
blame the
mean,
governor for that? What
obviously,
the hell is
it's
he
a
talking
big
about?
area of world trade and global transit. So I think the virus probably was quietly expanding because until it gets into an older population, you don't really see it in the same way.
Thank you for
So
that.
earlier
We'll
I
get
was
to all of you
wrong.
again
I
in a
was
moment
wrong
here. Gonna get a
earlier.
quick break here. More
It's-
of your
the
questions
virus
from
is actually-
across America here at the White House.
The
in
projections are
Rose
more.
Garden.
It's doing worse than they thought it was going to do.
Oh yeah, did you see Thunderfoot's video or projections? Did you
No.
see what he did? Thunderfoot put out some interesting graphs yesterday, and he basically has argued that the infection rate is worse than China, that the outcome is going to be worse than China. So if you look at his graphs and his numbers, it's like we're in a lot of trouble. Yeah.
Well, I got to check out what Thunderfoot has done because
Yeah,
I was looking at a couple of other projections, and it's true. If the models stay the same, if we're talking about the growth rate, and it's like it's insane in like 10 days. You know, it's like crazy.
Yeah, I think Thunderfoot projected 19 days until peak, so it's like another 3 weeks effectively of this.
But that's
And
but
it's
that's
like,
but
yeah.
that's But the one thing is that whenever you look at something like this, there are other factors that also influence the numbers other than just, because right now we're using previous data to kind of predict future models. So, if things like we're doing now won't show up for 14 days, so maybe another, 7 or 8 days, we'll start seeing the impact of social distancing, of this, isolation, and that would starve the virus of new victims. If people aren't just out there, like the subways for the past 2 weeks now have been empty. So all those people who would have been infected are going to be less likely to have been infected.
Now, I'm interested to see what your perspective is, particularly being in New York in the heart of this, because on terms of like looking at things beyond the health risk in terms of forming policy. Because one of the things that Trump has been alluding to is, maybe we should like go back to work because the harm to the economy might be worse than the death toll would be. And I'm interested, like, your thoughts on the philosophical rationale of balancing those interests.
Well, the philosophy of it, my philosophical state is that if you're asking me to make a choice between money and life, I'm always going to choose life, right? I don't think there's anybody who would question that choice. Here's somebody's life, here's some money. That's I'm choosing life, but there are situations that may make that choice a little more difficult. And I think the choice here is in one instance, we have projections, models, from past events that tell us, this is what's likely to happen. This is how many lives we're likely to lose. Looking at the models from the CDC, they were talking about, it can be anywhere from 200,000 to, up to 10 million. In some instances, 3% of a population of 6 billion people. That's a lot of people. We're talking about millions of people. We're not talking about a small amount of people.
Right.
So, but on the back end of it, Trump is saying that the economy is going to cause people to lose lives, but he hasn't told us how. He hasn't told us any study. He hasn't told us. He's kind of, to me, it just seems like he's giving, thousands of people are going to die or commit suicide if the economy goes down. But the economy goes down all the time. It goes down, it goes up. Not to this extent, it goes up and down all the time. So I think you would just need to give me something more than just, I believe there will be more suicides. You know what I'm saying? The other side is showing me data and saying we're projecting this amount, millions of amounts of deaths.
Yeah, totally fair.
Hold on, let me play this. We'll get back into it.
The virus and give a lot of people hope about getting back to their regular lives. You said
that's you.
That I'm sure a lot of people were pretty keen.
You guys hear an echo?
You said that we would. I'm paraphrasing now.
Hold on. Do you hear an echo?
I hear nothing now.
All right. Before you heard
before. Yeah, I heard an echo before.
Let me just redo this. Maybe it might just kill the echo. Oops. Because all right, making sure I'm all good over here. Breaking news: Donald Trump. Here we go. Sorry about this, guys. Make sure we play this.
Dow at 20,000. RIP economy. At least it's up right now. That's good news. Up 8%. I'll take what I can get. Lord. Yeah, I don't know if I can't hear you, Nate. I'm going to restart my stream.
Oh, I said I'm muted. Sorry, you muted on the stream. Sorry. Thank you. Thank you, Barney. But how does he know that? My thing is, how does he know that? What data does he have for that?
I hear you.
Like,
now.
I'm trying to figure out what data does he have for that? He keeps saying that more people would die. How does he know that? How's he come to that conclusion?
That's a little unduly projectionist for my taste. That's a little bit too speculative. But I think the broader case is a little bit easier. That the total amount of harm that will be caused from people losing jobs and not having income streams and defaulting on debts and so forth and so on. I mean, you can make some sort of back of the envelope calculations because you can see like, well, how much debt are people on average carrying? What is the average amount of money that someone has for the case of an emergency? What kind of businesses are being impacted by the most and what kind of unemployment? And I think someone was saying there's going to see like 2 million unemployment filings this month they're projecting, which is insane. So you can try to make some at least back of the envelope calculations on the economic impact and try to make the case that that's worse than the disease, depending on your view of things. It's like the disease is a short-term harm. People are going to be hurt, people are going to die right now. But so it's a short-term versus long-term thinking, which is arguably how we got here in the first place, right? Because one of the reasons the disease has been so impactful is because people weren't looking at like long-term threats about viruses and pandemics, right? They're looking at short-term versus long-term. And then when the long-term threat comes, they're not ready. So in the same way, it's like, okay, now we're making a short-term calculation on the disease versus the economy, and we're not thinking far enough ahead to do the right analysis. Yeah, I can't hear anything. Can't hear Fox and I can't hear Nate. Yeah, oh, there we go.
Left, and I want to bring in our panel of experts too. Dr. Mehmet Oz is with us, Dr. Mark Siegel, and Dr. Nicole Saphier. I want to give you guys a round of questions quickly here with Dr. Oz. Why don't we start with Dr.
The sound just seems to be.
I got it. No audio at all. I got it. Sorry.
No worries. Yeah, sorry if I was talking over you, Nate, but I literally couldn't hear you in my ears, so I just thought you were letting me talk. So I don't know
I was letting you talk. I'm sorry.
Governor Cuomo, Governor Newsom, making liaisons that weren't there before. Do you think that
all right,
that
Fox
kind
News
of
should be back on now.
Sorry,
guys.
And other people work with you.
Can you hear it?
Will help us to isolate the virus in the epicenters where they are, to separate out those epicenters, to test the people in those centers, and to thereby squash the virus.
I do. I think, Doctor, it's a very good thing. And Governor Newsom and I have been getting along really great. We're sending the ship, the great hospital ship, as you know.
That hospital ship is going to be good.
We are doing very well with, I think, almost all of the governors. For the most part, it really has become something. We're dealing almost every day. We're speaking to each other, whether it's conference calls. Usually we'll have 50 governors on the call at the same time. No, I think we're doing very well. But, it's a two-way street. They have to treat us well also. They can't say, oh, gee, we should get this, we should get that. We're doing a great job, like in New York, where we're building, as I said, 4 hospitals, 4 medical. We're literally building
because they know what's coming.
Centers. And then
they're not building 4 hospitals for
there's
nothing.
A problem with ventilators. Well, we sent them ventilators, and they could have had 15 or 16,000. All they had to do is order them 2 years ago, but they decided not to do it.
It's not 2 years. 2015 is 5 years ago, bro.
Dr. Oz is up.
Or was it
next.
16?
Go ahead, Doctor.
Either way.
President Trump, a good surgeon knows after the surgery when his patient can be discharged. And these 15 days are like a big operation on America.
Yeah.
But a great surgeon knows when there's a complication after discharge. So if we can meet the goal of fixing America and getting it back on its feet by Easter, I'd love to know exactly how you know that is safe from a medical perspective. What's going to indicate that we might have to pull back a tiny bit in case we have a relapse?
Well, I think, Doctor, a thing like that could happen, but I really believe that we can do much of what we're doing, and we can do it from a work environment instead of an environment where everybody's locked up and everybody is saying, oh, the business is gone, and everybody's suffering depression. You know better than anybody about depression.
People suffering
when you
depression.
talk about depression
Versus
and
lives.
that
Come on,
causes
dear,
death,
people
and it
have a little
causes
depression,
a lot of
okay,
problems.
but we
And,
can recover.
these are people,
You
they
can't
wanna
recover
save
from
their
death.
business.
Does
They
he
don't wanna
understand
be
that?
locked up in some room or some
the
apartment
depression,
or house, and
self-harm
in the meantime, their
is a
restaurants
little
closed, their
speculative
businesses
for my
closed.
taste.
They want to be
No.
saving their business, and I believe very
So
strongly. You're
so
gonna lose
people,
far
millions
more
of
people by
millions
going
of deaths
that way than you
versus
are
this guy
if we
wanting to
kept
save
this
his
thing
business.
going. I could keep them
Millions
out,
of
but
deaths
I'm
versus
sure that we
people
have
may
doctors that would
have
say, let's keep
depression.
it closed for
I'm
2
talking about like
years.
I'm not understanding
Okay,
the
let's
evaluation
close it up
being
for
made
2
here.
years. No,
Yeah, the overall
we gotta
business
get it
impact
open.
is a
Our
more
people
reasonable
want it
discussion,
open,
but
and that's the way this
people
country
might
was built.
resort to
Dr.
self-harm.
Nicole
It's like
Sapphire
that's just
now.
speculative.
Doctor, go ahead with your question.
It's like you can make a reasonable projections
Thank
on
you. And President
the economy,
Trump, I do
but-
believe as a nation that we are
Yeah.
beholden to you for your decisive, swift action in the beginning with the travel ban.
Oh, yeah.
I do think that we would have been
Support it
in a much
right here.
different, worse situation had that not
She
happened.
used the word beholden,
However,
which
we still
caught me
did have
off
a
guard.
lag in the testing,
We're
which of
beholden.
course did not have anything to
Okay.
do with you. But my question is for Dr. Birx and the task force. As we still see
Mm.
across the nation that some people are not able to get tests, I have colleagues that still can't test some of their patients. Is there a plan to fast track or even parallel track rapid ELISA serological testing to try and get this out there so that we can mobilize more PPE and more hospital beds by doing more testing and being able to
How
isolate
does
those
more
people
testing
quickly?
help with PPE?
Yeah, that's a
I
very
don't know.
good question. So right now, the tests that we have are all based on the RNA of the virus. And so we're utilizing the platforms, and thank goodness we're utilizing the platforms that were developed really to work and support HIV positive clients. So this is their machines that have been used to detect their viral load for the last more than a decade in the United States. Those machines right now are being utilized for this test in a high throughput way. We've asked developers to work on a point of care fingerprint test that could be used for antibody and antigen. But the antibody test will only tell you if you have been infected. Even if we can get IgM, it will be part of the early and probably recovery phase. And then we're working with companies to work on getting RNA tests that are point of care. So these are really critical tests that people are working on right
Hopefully
now.
it'll start. You'll be able to get tested quicker
We're
too.
using
Your results
what we
back.
have today to ensure that we can get more testing done. And I just want to say, I want to thank the American people and physicians who have let us prioritize.
Rand Paul
Remember,
got
we didn't
tested
have
like
this
on a
platform
Monday
until 8 days ago.
and didn't find out till
We've done all of
Friday.
these
And by that time, he
diagnoses
was
for
holding the Senate,
inpatients
hugging
primarily.
everybody up and all that stuff.
In that 4 days, he interacted with some people.
Prioritize our
Yeah,
testing
he was,
to hospital patients.
kissing Mitch
We
McConnell
will,
in the
over
mouth.
next
It was
few
crazy.
weeks, be able to make more tests available to the actual American public with symptoms and to the doctor's offices as you've requested.
And Nicole, it's important to remember we've done more tests in 8 days than South Korea's done in 8 weeks. And our tests are better. They're highly sophisticated.
I don't know
And
about
frankly,
that.
I took one. It's not the most
He just
pleasant
throwing-
thing
now
in
he-
the
he
world.
just
I
throwing
will
stuff
tell you
out
that.
there.
We're going to have a much
Hold
simpler
on, let me
test
take
very
this
soon.
call.
But we have a really
I'm right
good
here.
test,
Numbers right here.
and we've done more in 8 days. Nobody knows that. I just heard this number a few minutes ago. I learned it from being on your show, actually.
I think the way you
Pretty
described
impressive.
it was up the nasal passage and took a
and
right
hang
hand,
a right.
hang a right at the eye.
Hang a right under the eye.
To all of you, stand by. We've got a few more moments left here, but as our virtual town hall continues, to all the doctors, Nicole Sapphire, Mehmet Oz, and Mark Siegel, we very much rely on you on a day-to-day basis. So thank you for being a part of this today. Quick commercial break. Back to the Rose Garden in a moment as our town hall continues.
All right, yeah. So I'm gonna let my conservative leanings lean out here as Date's taking
I'm
his
back.
call.
I'm back. It's Cole. It's my we're doing the remote learning, so the teacher calls and they do video conferencing, but now sometimes she calls if something is up. So, but she calls to speak to my daughter. Sorry. So
I do think that there's generally some what I would call like a cost of doing business calculation, and
cool.
one of the things that they have analogized to, and the use of the analogy is questionable, but you can look at like automobile accidents, like what are the good and what is the harm, right? It's like if we were interested in saving just one life, that is the most important thing. Well, we just make automobiles illegal, because then we'd have no automobile accidents anymore. Of course, that would lead to its own scope of problems because people wouldn't be able to get to hospitals fast because we no longer have ambulance, right?
No longer have automobiles.
So there's a cost of business calculation to be made in like, is it worth it? And so we have as a society have decided it's good to have automobiles because they bring us so much productivity and so much freedom that 30 to 40,000 people dying a year is worth the cost of doing business.
And but there's also this benefit of that people are also saved by automobiles too. The people who are being rushed to hospital with automobies are being saved. So it's not just a negative.
So it's not all negative, right? There's positive and negative benefits both ways.
Yeah.
So like, what is the unknown a little bit here is what the cost of doing business in terms of like, if we just allow people to commingle completely freely, like what would that actually mean? And what would that actually devastate? We don't really have that number. So that's where the analogy breaks down because we have a fog of war situation.
But can I answer the part about that number? See, we don't have a number, but we have a prediction, right? The way the models work is through growth rates. It's how fast you grow every day over time. And what you're looking for is that exponential growth curve, right? If I've got 2 today, 4, 6, and I start seeing it grow at a particular clip, then I know that I got a problem, regardless of anything else, right? I just have seeing more people in a hospital at a bigger clip. So I think.
Watching along with everyone.
Let me mute this.
And we are going to listen to the very last moments of this virtual.
You know what? Let's talk about this right after this because this is the last moments, right?
That's fine. For you
because I think the argument it's not an easy argument. I do think I agree with you that the argument is something on both sides.
White House task members are doing this virtual town hall, taking questions from the media. I mean, even Dr. Oz was in on the mix, asking questions.
Even Dr. Oz, even Dr. Oz was there. Forget the Surgeon General or like all these other doctors, but even Dr. Oz.
Hold on, we're watching the Fox News channel, so this is them saying that.
Right here on Fox 10 Extra, we'll go out to the special that is being presented by our sister station in San Francisco, KTVU, as they are once again doing their coronavirus daily update. So
I feel sorry for the beer Corona because they lost all this money because they like the coronavirus. Somebody's buying
I actually saw at least one photo of a store where like everything was cleaned out except for the Corona beer, which is like just because people are stupid apparently.
Well, you heard about the guy drinking what he called? He drunk
the fish tank cleaner
because it had it's like insane.
Oh no! And like the way the media is reporting on this is pissing me off on levels,
with
man.
My colleague Harris Faulkner, I have about 90 seconds left, and just with the panel here, the president, the vice president, Dr. Birx, and the Surgeon General. Thank you again for your time. I see this as a public service, but also as a way to try and figure out what the facts are, and that's the reason we came here. But you were just saying again, Mr. Vice President, during the commercial, the way you can achieve your objective is how.
Well, the president made it clear yesterday that we want to open up the country as soon as we can. But the key is that more Americans, and tens of millions are, Bill, the more Americans have put into practice the president's coronavirus guidelines, 15
Just read
days
those off because
spread,
it's hard to see.
The sooner we'll be able to open up.
What is it? Wash your hands. If you're sick, stay home.
It's personal hygiene. It's
personal hygiene. Take a shower.
Sick, stay home. If someone in your house
a little bit.
has the virus, stay home. But
take a shower.
Avoiding groups of
wash your face. Wash your hands. Yes, that would be a good start. Yes.
Don't eat in restaurants during this period of time. Use the drive-through. These are all the principles that every American can do. Now, there are going to be Americans that have different guidance from their state and local officials.
Wear clean
that are more
clothes.
Stringent. We defer to that. We respect that. But the more Americans that do this, the sooner that we'll be able, as the president said, to get back to work.
We have to be a patient nation if you're going to ask them to do this, as you well know. Mr. President, thank you for
Wipe
your
down
time.
your countertops.
And I'll see you a bit later on Bill Hemmer Reports at 3 o'clock Eastern Time. And to Mr. Vice President,
that's
Mike
it.
Pence, thank you, Dr. Birx. Terrific work. And the Surgeon General, thank you for sharing your knowledge with us today.
So that's it. That's it for the Fox News piece. So what do you think overall?
Well, I think that the measures that they're taking now, based on the projections and based on the infection curves, make total sense. Because last I saw, they're looking at like 0.3 infection rates. So everyone who's infected infects 0.3 people, every day. So that the triples every 3 days or doubles every 3 days. And so you can look at that curve and what that would mean. And so by imposing the things they're imposing, it keeps that curve down. Now, there's a case to be made, and a pretty credible one, that we should have done more sooner to flatten the curve more sooner. I think that Thunderfoot has it essentially right, that we're on a projection for a 2 to 3 week ramp up until we hit whatever the peak of this is going to be. I do think there's a conversation to be had about the economic impacts and what we're willing to absorb in the long term, because if people can't go back to work, because restaurants are always on the edge, they're on thin margins. Restaurants fail at a horrendous rate anyway, so a lot of these aren't coming. A lot of these aren't going to open again. A lot of small businesses aren't going to open again. The big businesses are going to be really conservative on their money for a while because they don't have the customers they used to have. So like the economic impacts are real. And when we're thinking about like total damage that this virus is going to cost, the health cost is obvious, but the incidental costs, like the
economic impact,
the economic impact, and even the social costs, like what is it doing to us in terms of our social relationships with each other, and whether that's good, how's that going to change the way we interact with each other socially?
That's true.
So I think there are other costs that are relevant to the equation as we're contemplating a policy perspective. It's like, how do we balance all these legitimate interests? And I don't think it's quite as simple as saying, saving one life is all that matters. I'm like, it's not how we do these calculations in any other arena of our lives. We make decisions every day that, there's risk involved in everything. You can't, there's risk in staying home and there's risk in going outside. It's like, you can't avoid risk. It's like, you just have to figure out what risks are worth, living. And I think that, I'm looking at downtown Austin right now because that's where I live. I'm just thinking about how screwed downtown Austin is, because a lot of these companies were betting on South by Southwest because I think they get something like half their income on it. So a lot of these businesses had leveraged debt based on income they assumed that was going to have. Now they don't have. So a lot of these places aren't going to reopen. I mean, the economic impact is massive.
Well, it's interesting because I am conflicted in two ways. Number one, it's what am I comparing? Because I've heard on both sides, both people, it's hard to understand what am I comparing. On one side, I have models that say we can have 2 million people dead within the next 6 months, right, from the CDC models. And this is from both infection rates and these are all, even though we're all making abductive reasoning, reasoning to the best explanation on past data that, I think everyone would admit isn't perfect. But just off the data that we have, we know that there's a problem. There are more, the hospitals, there are more people in hospitals. There, like here in New York, hospitals are at much more capacity. And, you can kind of, we have this much supplies, we have a burn through rate of this, and we're coming to a point where we're not going to have enough beds and enough supplies for what we see, not for what, we project out, for what we see. So even so at that point in time, I think you can easily start modeling, well, if this continues to go at this particular rate, how many people will we have dead? What would be the effect on just the vast population? Not one life, but just overpopulation. First, you have the run on the hospital. So now you don't have, the hospital bed. You have the if like in New York, you only have 53,000 hospital beds, and if you only have 53,000 hospital beds, and you got 100,000 people, which they are projecting, I think, in a week and a half, like 100,000 people, you're going to have people who've not been affected at all with the virus, just not be able to not be able to survive because they got into a car accident and there's no hospital bed for them.
Right, exactly.
So I think that compounded problem is what we're trying to avoid. And what it's worth, could we say, well, hey, we're going to let those people die because other people need to work? And I think that's the part where both are horrible situations. It's like that moral game where that moral question where do you flip the train switch and kill one person, or do you let the train go down and kill 5? I think it's hard to just say one side is correct and one side is wrong because they both have horrible consequences.
It's a trolley problem, and both of the tracks are covered in fog. It's like
exactly,
we know some of it, but not all of it. So we're trying to make moral calculations in a place where we're a little bit in the dark and trying to figure out what's going on. So it makes the moral calculation difficult. But like the idea that, we do actuarial accounting all the time and trying to like figure out the cost of the worth of life. We do it in every single insurance. We do it in every sort of aspect of life. We do these kind of cost calculations. A lot of them are silent behind the scenes. A lot of stuff you wouldn't even think about. Every time you walk outside, walk down the door. You could always be hit by a bus. But you're not really thinking about it in the back of your head. But there's always that calculation about the risk factor about just going about your life. So the idea that we shouldn't be looking at these other impacts because it's somehow disrespectful strikes me as a little bit odd. On the one hand, and also I'm like looking at counter worlds. It's like if I get COVID and I wind up dying, I'm going to be pretty irritated that that I might have lobbied for a position that put me in a worse position. However, if I don't get COVID and my business dries up and I'm homeless, I'll be equally irritated that we didn't take economic measures.
But
so it's like I'm looking into potential futures of potential things that could happen. Like, what am I going to be more irritated by later?
What about the understanding too that you do have this kind of group dynamic of pain where it's just not an individual pain, but now everybody's not working. They got we're trying to fix the problem for a majority of people. Even though I know in the abstract, the one person they're going to say, well, damn. But like for instance, in New York, they had to suspend all rent payments. They had to suspend all mortgage payments. Because the impact has been spread out so far. Where I think the individual. Their impact is going to be great, I think, in the long term, but in the short term, I think it's less of a problem because there's so many people impacted on it. It's kind of like that. That's why they're trying to send people $15,000 or $1,500 checks. But I think also when you are making the evaluation on one side, I think it's unfair in one sense. When you say one side, you have just science, and you have these scientists making this prediction and saying this is how many people would die, and this is what you need to do. And then on the other side, you have the real world consequences of those people still have to go to work. Those people still have to feed their children. Just to shut down everything. How do we solve that problem? Because nobody going. 30,000 restaurant workers not going to work. That's a problem in of itself. That could be that would be disastrous in any other situation, but this one. You know what I mean? But this one. So, again, I didn't run for president, so I don't know but that's why he's the one that's got to make the choice. But I think if your medical professionals are telling you, we need to get this curve, we see a rate of growth for people who are being hospitalized by this disease to be X. And we expect 2 million or 3 million people to die if we don't get this curve down. And this is the way we get it down. It's going to take, let's say, 3 months of this type of thing. He needs to get his economic team to say, well, for us to do this for 3 months, this is going to cost us this. And this is what we think is going to be the lives lost if we close it down. And that if somebody can do that and give me that evaluation, then I can say, okay, well, in both situations, we're going to lose 6 million lives. Then maybe it may just be, okay, let's just go this route. Or if somebody's going to say, well, no, that way we'll lose 50,000 lives. This way we'll lose 6 million more lives. Then it'll just make me an informed choice. And I'm hoping Trump's people are giving him that choice. I hope this is just an all anecdotal. We're going to have a whole bunch more suicides. If we get 10 more suicides versus 6 million lives, I would like to know, like, okay, unfortunately, I would rather not lose any life, but then that's the evaluation. We still drive.
Yeah, it's like I wasn't the Federal Reserve the other day who was putting out projections of like potential unemployment at 20%. And some people I've even been hearing higher numbers than that. The unemployment during the Great Depression, I think, was 23.9%, if memory serves, when it was at the peak of the Great Depression. So like a 20% unemployment rate is the Great Depression. So we're talking about economic impact. So like, on the one hand, if we do something and people start dying, people are going to be really, really irritated that people start dying, and rightly so. However, on the other hand, if we go the other way and we completely strangle the economy, so we're back to like seeing those photos circa 1933, 1934, with complete unemployment and, people begging for bread, and we're rewriting the Great Gatsby again. It's like people are going to be really, really irritated about that. So it's like there's like basically no win scenario, and it's just trying to figure out what is the least harmful thing to do, all factors being considered.
Well, but then it sounds like you do admit though that it comes down to to one point, or the in one instance we're trying to we're doing these preventive measures to save lives. You're shutting down the economy because you believe it's going to save lives in the future, right? That's the only reason why we're doing this. If we didn't believe it's going to save lives, we would not be doing this. But we believe it's going to save millions of lives.
Yeah.
And on the other end, we don't know, right? It seems like you're saying we don't know what the impact's going to be if we didn't do this, right? Like, what do you think the worst case scenario would be if we didn't do any of these measures? What do you think the worst case scenario would be?
I think the worst case. I think the worst case scenario is 1.5 million to 2 million dead. Is the worst case scenario,
and that's in the U.S. alone, though, right?
Yeah, that'd be U.S. alone numbers. Yeah,
and that's within the next. I think they said 1 year, right? That would be within a year.
Oh yeah, I mean, given its spread rate, if you did nothing with a 0.3 spread rate, it'd spread to every American inside of a month, and then you'd have the impacts, and so you'd be done within like 4 months. So you'd have horrific body counts, but yes, that's the kind of numbers you'd be talking about in that scenario.
And then even on top of those numbers, because all those people would obviously take up all of the beds in the healthcare system. So there's what I did the number. There was when you run through the numbers, I did the numbers the other day. It's 24 million. There's 331 million people in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
They said something between 48 to 70% of people are going to get it. So if you just take the low number, 48% from the CDC gave, that's 160 million Americans. If you then take our hospitals, if you take the amount of hospital beds, 923,000 hospital beds, you just don't, it would be compounded because you'd have the people who are dying of COVID. Then you have a group of people that got to hospital, so they would likely not die. You got the people who couldn't get hospital beds, they would die. And then you got the people who would survive, but other than the fact that they're on hospital beds, would also die. So we're talking about, I think, a huge number of, not just the people who would die from COVID-19, but the people who would die from other reasons because there's a COVID-19 issue.
Yeah, that too. Yeah, so these are the kind of numbers that you're talking about. It's this totally horrific numbers. I think like the total number of people have died, like in all American wars total, is less than that. Because Civil War is like 650,000, and so you double that basically. So yeah, all U.S. casualties for all wars is like 1.3, 1.4 million total. So you'd be looking at more casualties than all the wars.
And the CDC, yeah. and this is the CDC who thinks that that 24 million people will need hospital beds. So it's just a number that is obscene to even think. So I understand, but if worst case scenario is that, and obviously it's going to be less than that because we're really right on the tip. 30,000 infections, we got 300 million people. There's a lot more to go. This is just the tip of the iceberg. So even if thinking about that and seeing the growth rate as we see it, I would say it is too early, unless you see some major changes within the growth rate and all that. I think it's just too early to make a decision whether this works. Like, I would have to see that this is actually working to turn the curve, and I would even be thinking about doing even more extreme measures in 14 days because it's going to take you 14 days to figure out if what you're doing is working anyway, because that's the incubation period. So in 14 days, there should be a reevaluation of it.
I at the risk of me not being misunderstood, I do think we are making the right decision now in terms of the calculation, because it's like you're looking at this horrific situation and this short-term impact. It's just like, where are we going to be a week from now, 2 weeks from now, 3 weeks from now, is kind of the questions that I'm wondering and trying to like balance that out in my head. And of course, we're going to have a lot more information a week from now, 2 weeks from now, 3 weeks from now. But I think at the moment we're making the right decision because, of all the capacity, flattening the curve, so forth and so on. So in the short term, I think it's fine. If all of COVID ended tomorrow, and everyone went back to normal business, then everything would be fine.
We wouldn't have a problem. Yeah,
there's no fundamental problem in the American economy.
No.
Everyone would go back to business. The restaurants would reopen. Everyone would be fine. As this goes on more and more, though, that calculation changes. That's just what I'm trying to say there.
Yes, Barney says 1 million dead means 200 million cases. If you're sticking with the 0.5 CFR, I'm confirmed infection. I'm not sure what CFR stands for. I know what's it called? There's the federal what's it called? The CRF? Is it CFR for the Code of Federal Regulations?
Yeah, Code of Federal Regulations.
Yeah. What will that do to the economy? 1 million dead. So I think Barney's asking, 1 million dead, 200 million cases. Wouldn't that be a negative to the economy also?
Well, as long as we're going cold-hearted actuarial, which 1 million depends.
Case to fatality ratio
makes a humongous impact. If you go back to the Spanish flu, the people that were being mostly impacted were like 20 to 30-year-olds. And that is a lot different than if COVID is impacting the elderly, grossly disproportionate. So there's a economic calculation there that is different depending on who is part of the 1 million.
Well, one person says it's Barney says he's saying case fatality ratio, and someone else was saying confirmed fatality rate. All right, they seem like the same thing, but
either of those works for me.
Yeah. But again, I don't think I think the fatality rate is it's good to speak about the fatality rate, but I think the fatality rate is different than the hospitalization rate. Because the hospitalization rates have been about 15 to 20%. Those are people who will need hospital beds to survive. And if you take that hospitalization rate, you get 24 million people. So in other words, and the way it's been explained to me, they will not be able to recover from COVID if they don't have hospital beds. That's what's going on in New York right now. The people who come in with COVID-19, they need ventilators to survive. They put them on ventilators, they survive. So they won't end up in your mortality number because of the use of the hospital. But now you're going to have those hospital beds are not going to be available. So mortality rate is going to jump because the people who would only recover with the hospital bed will not have hospital beds. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So, but we'll see. Right now, I know there's a problem in New York City hospitals. The public hospitals are the ones that are now being, and I think that makes more sense because most people who get sick, go to public hospitals and private hospitals. So the public hospitals ERs are really starting to blow up here. But I haven't heard too much out of the private hospitals. I know yesterday in the rain, there were like lines around the block to get into the ER. And I'm thinking some of that might have also just been panic. Like a lot of people just panicking, thinking, I got a cold, I got something, so forth. So
yeah, I think the short term is going to be pretty ugly. I think it was the Surgeon General who was saying like this week is going to be pretty bad. And I'm like, he's probably right. This week looks like it's going to be pretty bad. So I think we're going to have a pretty different perspective a week from now than we do right now.
And I think Fiona makes a very good point. It's not going to be just the elderly. And I think the reason why for that is that if all the elderly are in hospitals taking up the beds and ventilators, then the young person who's out here rock climbing or gets into a car accident, they're going to die because there's no hospital bed for them to recover. Or the person who may just have, just some random, I don't want to say heart attack, but young people do have strokes. They do have heart attacks, even though it's less likely. But they do utilize the healthcare system. It's less likely, but they do, to recover from things. So, yeah. but we'll see. Again, it's supposed to get really bad this week, which if everything is going on. But my last question is about the Defense Production Act. Do you think Trump? Now there are two arguments. The first argument is the Trump argument. Trump is saying he doesn't want to nationalize businesses for two reasons. Number one, this is the only part of the economy that is vibrant right now. Hospital supplies, that type of thing, and they have a supply chain. So to let them continue to do their work, ship, because again, this is one of the few sectors that you actually have up and running. Mm-hmm. But the problem with that is that, like, let's say New York needs about 10 million masks, but so does California, so does Washington, so does now all these states who are dealing with this, who have asked. So everybody's trying to buy from the suppliers. The suppliers will promise it to New York for $5, but then California say, well, listen, I'll give you 10. So you're driving up price naturally because you got low supply, high demand. Price is exploding. But what the governors are saying is that what Trump can do is he can take over not only those businesses but other businesses, force them to create ventilators, masks, so forth and so forth. And by doing that, he could also stabilize the price. You can't charge but so much for this under this declaration. But obviously Trump says he doesn't want to do that. He wants to see if he could just, he doesn't want to compel people to do it. He wants people to do it on their own. So what do you think? Do you think we're at the point now where Trump should now start compelling, car companies? I'm just making this up, but let's say a car company to start creating ventilators, so to stem the tide, or hands all off. Let's see if the market can just make it happen.
I think right now, at least, my understanding is that the businesses are voluntarily standing up. I've actually heard that Ford is working with 3M and GE to make respirators and ventilators. So apparently Ford, the motor company, is now in the respirator business, which if you look to World War II is not unprecedented.
Most companies did
one of my personal favorite examples of this is Singer, the maker of sewing machines, made 45 pistols. So you have Singer made 45 caliber handguns, which if you can find one today is worth like $1.5 million because they're very, very rare. But the point being that these businesses, can do it. So far they seem to be voluntary, and because there is market demand and need for it, and a lot going into it. So, I would just assume not order someone to do it if you don't have to. I think the levers of government are always tempting as power, but when the government takes power, they have a nasty tendency of holding on to it. It's a little hard to get away from them. So, all us being equal, I'd prefer not to do that because, undoing it may not be as easy as it was to do it. So I worry about that.
But well, the one thing I would say is that if we predicted that we're going to run out of ventilators, I think the New York City said about 7 days they're going to run out of ventilators, so they're going to need more ventilators. If that occurs, I would say at that point it's too late. Right, because now people are dying that could have been on ventilators, and so you tried. The private sector failed. I think if you were to order them to do it and then have them, then maybe even earlier that would have made the difference. That person would have survived. So it's to the point where at what point in time do you pull the trigger? Because right now the facts are there's not enough ventilators, and even though Ford and 3M are making them, are they making enough for supply the country? Because that's what needs to happen. Just like in World War II, the typewriter companies making they made something like 41 billion rounds of ammunition, enough to kill everybody on the planet 7 times over. That was a typewriter company because we didn't need typewriters. You know what I'm saying? We need ammunition. So I think at this point in time, I do understand. And then after World War II, and then even after the Korean War, they went back to doing what they did best, but because there was the war effort. And I think at this point in time, you have, if it was good enough for World War II, if it was good enough for the Korean War, it's still, I think it's going to be good enough for now. It's just a new type of enemy. It's easier when it's saying we gotta, we're fighting so they don't take us over. But now it's like we're fighting to stay alive. And if that's not good enough to force companies to say, hey, we're trying to keep millions of people alive, make these goods, then what is? At that point, what is?
Well, I can't disagree with you. If it would have been the case that we could have ordered them to do it and would have made them available, and we didn't, and they aren't available, then that is not good. So, in the counterfactual world where he said, oh, by the way, I'm actually going to order people to do this, and it would have provided ventilators and people would have not died as a result, then I would agree with you. So I guess I'm only wondering the degree to which that world is different than our current world. How fast are the companies ramping this up voluntarily versus what they would have been able to do had they forced them to do it. So, I don't disagree with you because, if we get 8 days from now and New York is out, and then it would be too late because we could have made them all this time. So, but then again, at least some of these will be made in 7 days. So
thank God. Yes. We're waiting. So listen, we got to do this again. Are you doing any COVID-19 stuff? Because I'm doing the Defense Production Act. I'm gonna read through that and give everybody. Yeah, I thought it was.
That'll be entertaining. We all learn a lot, including me.
Well, it's actually. It's a Korean War era issue. It was because they needed to. It was right after World War II, so things weren't. People were trying to. It was like that transition back to civilian sector. So it was like now you got to fight another war. You guys, it was just 5 years ago. With just 5 years we just did this. So we're gonna, we're not going. You don't need our help. You go fight your own war. So the government that passed this act to essentially say, okay, no, we need you guys to help the war effort. And the Korean War wasn't actually an official declared war, right? It wasn't even officially declared war.
Oh yeah, no, it's police action.
Yeah. So anyway, so they did this for the Korean War, and then Congress has, after that has reauthorized it. But the United States in World War II, I think is I was deceptive in saying that World War II is another model, because World War II, all those companies volunteered to do that. So the typewriter company volunteered to do that. So all these companies, so in other words, the government wasn't going in and saying, you must do this. They were putting out contracts and saying, hey, we need, and it was the Great Depression. So typewriter companies weren't really doing great with typewriters. They're like, yo, listen, we think that you can make guns and this, hey, well, would you want a government contract to do this? And we'll pay you. So yeah, in the Great Depression, let's make something. And that's what brought us out of the Great Depression. So I think that it's not as clean to the Great Depression because you did have regular industry who were in the Depression, who were losing money. This was a great, and I think that might be even great here. You have companies who are losing money who, you may say, hey, we have contracts to make masks. Who wants to start making masks? You never know who'll step up. So, but we'll see. I'm assuming they're already doing all this because I have faith in the government.
I have faith in people. So we'll hope that people, will do this. But then I watch the people who are still on the beaches for some reason congregating, and that's like, I could become very rich if I could find a way to punch these people in the face over the internet. But
look at but Florida, I don't understand what's going on in Florida because they haven't. Well, now they're quarantining anybody from New York and New Jersey who goes to Florida.
Yeah,
you gotta or you get put in jail.
So all you snowbirds from New York, you stay out of Florida, man. You can analyze that, man. Let's do some analysis for Commerce Clause and some privileges and immunities for right to travel between state to state.
Wouldn't it be privileges or immunities, right? Privileges or immunities clause. One is and is 14th or is 5th.
Yeah, so it's or privileges or immunities. Yes, I always forget, but which is which. But yes, you're right because we be going to the original Constitution, not the 14th Amendment. Yes,
that's right. All right. Well, listen, let's get out of here. I got kids to now start teaching, and I got some more prime time news to start getting preparing for the night. I definitely want to do. What do you have? To let people know where to find you and what you got coming up.
Well, you can find me on my YouTube channel, which is conveniently called Uncivil Law. I release videos pretty much every day. I don't actually know what I'm releasing today. I have to take a look at the queue, but I typically release stuff every day. Yesterday, I did a live stream on the Supreme Court decision just came down that said states cannot be sued for appropriating people's copyright. The state of North Carolina borrowed someone's copyright and then didn't give them money, and the Supreme Court said, "Well, you're just out of luck." So that was the unanimous decision. I covered that yesterday. That was pretty interesting.
Was that 10th Amendment? Did they cite the 10th Amendment?
11th.
I mean, the 11th Amendment saying the states can't be but that makes sense though.
Yeah, and usually on Fridays I do a Supreme Court React where I react to oral audio from ongoing cases. Probably not so much right now since there are no Supreme Court cases at the moment. But that's normally what I do, and otherwise I just do stories that are in the news that catch my interest.
Well, listen, thanks. Yes, please go check out Uncivil Law. It's great stuff. I put your link in the chat. I'm going to put it in the description when I change the thumbnail.
Thanks,
and hey, listen, guys, we're all in this together. Things are tough now, and I'll be doing this every day, but we'll see because it's just this. I think there's pain to go either way. It's just how much pain we're going to accept. So, all right. My name is Nate Brody for Uncivil Law. Link in the chat. I will talk to you guys later. We are out in 3, 2,